Also a fine picture in the southeast. Late sunshine, then clear skies after dusk. Rain arriving there by the end of the evening. Wind and rain already reaching northern and western parts of Wales by 7 o'clock this evening, but drier towards the southeast, particularly around the Swansea area. It'll also be a largely dry start to the evening across the Midlands. That rain pushing in overnight, meaning everyone will have some wet and windy weather for a time. And a similar picture across the northeast of England, where the rain will be starting to push in, but won't affect most people until overnight. The winds strengthening and clouds building ahead of it. Meanwhile, taking a look at Scotland, the rain will have already cleared northern and western parts with clear, colder air feeding in, a wet and windy end to the day in the south and east. And the heavy rain also largely clearing Northern Ireland, where it will then be mostly dry through the night, under clear skies, turning quite chilly as well. Looking at the national picture overnight, you can see how the rain will progress southeastwards, with a few showers following on, and that's how the weather's shaping up for this evening.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good evening at 6 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Here are the top stories. Hundreds have attended a vigil in memory of the 10 people killed in a petrol station explosion in Ireland. It's the first of several vigils due to be held across County Donegal. All 10 from the village of Creesla, including a father and his 5-year-old daughter, have now been named by police. Pope Francis has offered his condolences to the people of Ireland. Irish authorities say the explosion on Friday is being treated as a tragic accident, although investigations are ongoing. Russia is assessing the damage on its only bridge to occupied Crimea after a huge blast destroyed large areas of it. The Kremlin has ordered Russia's Federal Security Service to guard the key route to the occupied peninsula. Traffic has resumed along part of the route, and Moscow has ordered repair work to begin immediately. Ukraine has previously said the crossing is a target, but have not claimed responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, at least 13 people have been killed after shelling in the Ukrainian city Zaporizhia. Around 87 others, including 10 children, are in hospital. Residential buildings were damaged in 12 Russian missile attacks, according to the governor of the region. Authorities say a rescue operation is underway. The president of the SNP says the Supreme Court will fail the people of Scotland if it doesn't allow the government to hold a second independence referendum. The Supreme Court will hear arguments this week before ruling if a prospective bill to hold another vote is within the powers of Holyrood. Speaking at the party's conference in Aberdeen, Mike Russell told delegates there's a choice that has to be made. The Scottish Government has emphasised its intention to hold an independence referendum in October 2023, regardless of the ruling. Police Scotland have issued a new appeal to find a woman reported missing in Edinburgh last month. Avril Shepley was last seen in the Marchmont area of the city at 10:30 p.m. on the 30th of September. The 47-year-old was last seen wearing a black woolly hat with toggles on each side and black trousers. Police have named a man shot dead by officers in a police station car park in Derby on Friday. 35-year-old Marius Sholak of Osmaston Road was armed with a knife. He was taken to hospital where he was pronounced dead. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is investigating the incident. Barristers are voting on whether to end strike action after receiving a pay offer from the government. According to the Ministry of Justice, the offer includes reforms to set fees for legal aid work and an investment of £54 million in the criminal bar. The vote closes at midnight. In Iran, 185 people, including 19 children, are said to have died in protest across the country over the last 3 weeks. Demonstrations began last month following the death of Mahsa Amini, who was detained by the morality police over allegations she was wearing her hijab too loosely. According to the Iran human rights group, hundreds of women and girls have taken part in protests despite accusations of authorities using brutal treatment to disperse them. Buckingham Palace has released a new picture of one of the Queen's favourite ponies. Emma, a fell pony, was part of the procession at the Queen's state funeral, who stood next to the long walk to Windsor Castle as the coffin was driven past. The palace says Emma will continue to be much loved and cared for in Windsor. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll have more news at the top of the hour.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry towards the southeast, but wind and rain spreading in from the northwest. Let's home in on that detail. So starting off in the southwest then, and here a mostly fine end to the day, but it will turn cloudier and windier ahead of some rain arriving overnight. Also a fine picture in the southeast, late sunshine, then clear skies after dusk, rain arriving there by the end of the evening. Wind and rain already reaching northern and western parts of Wales by 7 o'clock this evening, but drier towards the southeast, particularly around the Swansea area. It'll also be a largely dry start to the evening across the Midlands. That rain pushing in overnight, meaning everyone will have some wet and windy weather for a time. And a similar picture across the northeast of England, where the rain will be starting to push in, but won't affect most people until overnight. The winds strengthening and clouds building ahead of it. Meanwhile, taking a look at Scotland, the rain will have already cleared northern and western parts, with clear, colder air feeding in, a wet and windy end to the day in the south and east. And the heavy rain also largely clearing Northern Ireland, where it will then be mostly dry through the night, under clear skies turning quite chilly as well. Looking at the national picture overnight, you can see how the rain will progress southeastwards, with a few showers following on, and that's how the weather's shaping up for this evening.
Good morning and welcome to Portillo, where we have good conversation, a sprinkling of arts and entertainment, plus a bit of the ridiculous too. Well, one Sunday newspaper is confidently announcing that following the U-turn on the top rate of income tax, Liz Truss will be ambushed this week by her cabinet. It wants to ensure that she raises the universal credit benefit in line with inflation, a commitment that she has clearly not wished to make. The change will represent a further blow to her authority, which has taken several knocks during the brief period that she's been Prime Minister. As we saw this week, the Conservative Party conference was by all accounts a scene of political despair and fierce infighting. And in the circumstances, Liz Truss's speech was judged to be less bad than was anticipated. She spoke rather well. She dealt deftly with a climate activist who heckled, and she didn't send the financial markets into turmoil. But we're still left asking whether the Conservative Party can be led. Liz Truss is their fourth leader since the Tories returned to power in 2010. Some are already wondering how long she can survive. Why have her predecessors fallen along the wayside? Did they lack leadership qualities? And what might those qualities be? Can they be found elsewhere in British politics? Is Keir Starmer a natural or impressive leader? Does Nicola Sturgeon perhaps offer the best example of strong and effective leadership in the United Kingdom? I doubt that this is just a British problem. Incredibly, the Americans are being asked to believe that amongst 300 million of them, either Joe Biden or Donald Trump is the best person to lead the free world. So I asked this morning, where have all the leaders gone? In a moment, we'll discuss this with a panel in the studio. But first, Chris Parry is a retired Rear Admiral with the Royal Navy, now lectures in leadership. He joins me from a distance. Chris, I would say that politicians are not trained to be leaders, but you in the military are. What kind of a training is it?
Well, first of all, Michael, I'd like to say that, you've got two different types of leaders. Some people are natural leaders. They know what needs to be done. They're able to organise the human resources to achieve various tasks. The vast majority of people aren't suited. But more critically, people are normally put in leadership positions for which they're not personally suited. When I teach leadership, I say there are two very important factors. One is leadership is not about you. It's about something bigger than you. Secondly, you've got to have the right leader in the right place at the right time to deal with the right job. And I'm afraid to say across the political, the military and the commercial worlds, people are put in positions of authority who either don't have the natural aptitude or they don't actually have the skills to do that. Now, when you join the military, you have to have a certain baseline of personality and also attributes that actually get you into the service on which the service can build those leadership skills. But as I always tell my people, the best teacher is actually experience. And what you do is you serve alongside people of experience above and alongside you, and dare I say it, beneath you in the rank structure, and you learn from them all the time. And you just hope you're not put into action, into combat, at a time when your skills are at a very low level.
Yes, it's tough to learn on the job in the military because people's lives are at stake. What kind of a reflection do you have on what you see in politics? What do you think is the single most important thing that is lacking from the education of political leaders?
Well, I'm afraid to say, Michael, and I hesitate to say this, you're an ex-politician yourself, is that you can't be yourself and get to the top of any organisation. You're an imposter because you're saying different things to different people. The two most important things in a leader, I believe, essentially are self-awareness and also authenticity. And I think it's impossible to project those characteristics in the political space. At each stage of the selection process and the electoral process, you're having to say different things to different people. And I'm afraid to say you can't act from inner conviction all the time, and that can't be reflected in what you do. Where it does occur, of course, is when you're under severe pressure in wartime. Look at Churchill and people like that. And I have to say that part of Boris Johnson's appeal was, of course, he was quite open. He was authentic about who he was, and he went forward on that basis. But I think the problem is you get this difference in many leaders. I see it in the commercial sphere as well as the political and military sphere, where you have people acting picking out roles that they're not suited by temperament to actually fulfill. I've seen military commanders who, under pressure, particularly on operations and in war, are acting out who they think they should be rather than the people they really are.
Chris Parry, thank you very much. That's a slightly depressing conclusion. Let's bring in my panel, Dimitrios Spiridonidis, Associate Professor of Leadership at the Warwick Business School, Dr. Richard Jenkinson, Musical Director and Conductor, the British Police Symphony Orchestra, and Graham Wetone, a former police officer. Dimitrios, picking up from Chris Parry, what observation would you make about what is lacking in the education of political leaders?
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Such an exciting topic. Well, I mean, it's a difficult question. What is lacking from political leaders, from an educational point of view? The tricky point here is when you're looking for a leader, you need to ask, what do you need the leader for? And what I'm trying to say here is, if you need to respond to a crisis, you need a leader who has the authority to tell the rest of their people in a commanding way what they need to do. In a different situation, you need a different skills. If you need, for example, to treat a wicked problem, a problem that you don't really understand, as a leader, you need to be comfortable to say, you know what, I don't have the answers. I can't be the commander, but I can orchestrate a response, bring together all the necessary knowledge capabilities that I need to find a reasonably good solution to what I need to respond to.
So that's an argument for cabinet government and obviously working with colleagues in the House of Commons. May I just pick you up on the word orchestrate? Because Richard directs an orchestra. And I think many people from outside would believe that an orchestra, the conductor of an orchestra, is an authoritarian. He has complete control. But is it like that?
I don't believe it is, no. I think an orchestra or any organisation is only as good as its weakest member. So you've got to inspire, you've got to have integrity, and I think that's very important. And for me, that's something that's lacking or has been lacking recently in the political system. And you've got to inspire people so they actually can play out as well as they possibly can to give the best possible performance. I mean, we are all there in a concert situation to give the best concert possible for the audience so they come away elated or whatever the emotion might be. And I think that's really, really absolutely key to an orchestra's success, is how we project the emotions that are in the music to the audience.
So, again, teamwork. And I guess you're talking about carrot and stick, although both of those is rather a crude term, but nonetheless, some authority and some encouragement.
I think that's absolutely key to success. You've got to make sure things are rehearsed. You've got to make sure things are really, really as they should be. But then there's this extra layer of sheen, shall we say, on top, that gives it the sparkle, gives it the excitement in the concert hall. And that's possibly what we're lacking at the moment.
Graham, a former police officer, and I guess you're going to say that one of the most important things about the way the police operate is that you come up through the ranks generally to higher ranks. And I'm slightly preempting your argument to say that, oddly enough, this also happens to politicians. You know, very often they're councillors or the community workers. They eventually get into Parliament, they become junior ministers, blah, blah, blah. So they go up this route, but it doesn't seem to do the trick for them.
No, and similar to policing, you don't actually learn the role you're about to do until you get into it. So like in politics, you don't know what a minister does until you actually become a minister. But I picked up on the intro there. Leadership for me is about communication and listening. And a good leader will listen and read the room around them. And in policing, every police officer needs to be a leader. When you turn up at an incident, you have to almost like lead the public with you to get them to agree to do things they may not be willing to do, but they're going to have to do it with you. So it's about reading the room and looking at decisions you make and then reviewing your decision and changing it if need be. And I think within politics, from what I see from the outside, often bad decisions are not corrected or changed because it's almost like we've gone down this path, we're going to go regardless of the outcomes. And I think that's key in leadership. It's about knowing what you've done, why you've done it, and then maybe reviewing that and changing it if need be.
What is the key moment or rank in a police officer's progression, would you say? I mean, if we're talking about people getting through to high leadership, what's the important formative moment?
For me, it's the sergeants and the inspectors actually set the tone for the police officers on the street. Once you go beyond the inspector ranking to chief inspector, superintendent onwards, you're basically senior officers managing the staff underneath you. You have very little operational involvement. So they're the key ranks for me, is the lower levels, almost like in the military. The lower levels in the military before they go up into the higher ranks.
Demetrius, I don't know whether you're ever asked to give advice to politicians, but would you be able to devise a package of learning for politicians if you were asked to?
Yes, I think we do work with political leaders to some extent.
In Britain?
In Britain, yes. And typically we start from the starting point of our discussion is leadership. It's all about the ability to influence a group of people towards a certain goal. And that ability can come from a number of different ways. Some people can be charismatic and they're able to influence because they have this innate characteristic, this charisma that attract people to them. But it's not just about charisma, it's about understanding, being self-aware and understanding what is it that you need to, how do you need to work towards a certain problem? Where does the authority need to come from?
What does self-awareness mean? Does that mean recognising your flaws and trying to put them right?
Recognizing what do you know, how do you know what you know, and then realizing what you don't know, and then try to find the right approach to bring together all those knowledge capabilities to help you understanding how do you respond to a problem. So it's about yourself, but also it's about and how you relate to others. So yes, I think I keep saying that leadership is something that can be taught. Of course, theory suggests that some of us are born with the characteristics that can help us become leaders, but 90% leadership is made, and you need to experience, you need to learn to understand how you lead yourself and how you lead others in order to understand how you can influence people towards achieving a predefined objective.
Richard, if I'm right, some of your musicians are quite senior officers in the police, and they're used to commanding, and yet there you are with your baton, and for the moment, you are commanding. How do you handle that issue? Because this is very relevant to politics, isn't it? Because, I mean, half the problem is that the cabinet members think they ought to be Prime Minister. They've been passed over, that it should have been them, etc., etc., etc.
I think it's absolutely key for an orchestral conductor to realise that the musicians in front of you they're there to serve the music. We're all there to serve the music, and that is what we're all aiming to do. There are, of course, different ranks in the orchestra, and we go all the way from the Bobby on the beat right up to chief inspectors, right up to chief constables. But the orchestra is there, and we're all there to do the best we can do, and we're all there to achieve the goal, which is to produce a wonderful performance. Now, how we do that is that it is absolutely key for me as a conductor to make sure that nobody, and that includes the chief constables, includes everybody, is above the law, in inverted commas. So in other words, what we have to do is I have to make sure that I rehearse in a way which is both going to be exciting for the orchestra, but also is going to get the results that we want. And when that is that the people have to play together. And that is the key thing about being in an orchestra. You're part of a team, and the teamwork is actually key to the success of the concert, the success of the orchestra, if you like. How you achieve that, of course, is you've got to use lots of different strands or lots of different ways of encouraging people to, when there's a little bit they can't perhaps play, that they have to go away and practice that little bit. And it might take various guises. So you might have a chief constable in the room, and you might be a lazy chief constable, who knows? But and it might need just a private word. I think you need to look at that bit, because you're letting the team down here. Yeah,
so the team is the key word. Graham, you didn't rise particularly high in the ranks of the police, so you're perhaps in a good position to tell us the ones that you admired most at the top or towards the top. What was the characteristic? How did it turn out well for that officer?
I think because they had a confidence, and you knew they'd almost like they understood your role. They, as was just mentioned there, it comes down to, it's a phrase in policing, in public order policing, about role, not rank. And it's the role actually that you're doing. So it's actually accepting their professionalism or expertise in playing a particular instrument, but they have to be part of the team and run to the leader of that particular team on a day. So if you're dealing with a protest or so, it doesn't matter what rank the officer was doing a particular role, there is always a leader. And the good leaders in policing will listen to their staff, will accept they've got their own professionalisms and expertise, and take the best from each of those before they make their decisions. So it's about being part of a team, but that seems to struggle in politics sometimes.
Well, any political leaders who have been tuned in today, they've heard the words, things like teamwork and self-awareness and taking people with you and listening. Thank you very much to Dimitris Spiridionidis, Dr. Richard Jenkinson and Graham Whettone, and Chris Parry, who was speaking to us earlier. Coming up, The Lost King, the film about finding the remains of Richard III. It opens in cinemas this week. But was it really the last king of the Plantagenets who was discovered in that car park? We speak with an historian who has his doubts. That's after the break.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Portillo. I have a passion for history, and whilst making a television documentary, I felt an extraordinarily exciting connection to the past when I was standing in a very large hole in a car park in Leicester. Shortly before my arrival in that hole, the medieval skeleton of a man had been removed. It had an S-curve to the spine, suggesting that he had suffered from scoliosis. This made historians think that the body might be that of King Richard III, who was killed at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 and buried in the Franciscan Church of the Greyfriars in Leicester. The skeleton was examined for DNA evidence. Richard's maternal line, or mitochondrial DNA, was matched to two living relatives of his eldest sister, Anne of York. Michael Ibsen and Wendy Duldig were 14th cousins and both carried the same, extremely rare, genetic lineage as the body in the car park. To great excitement, it was announced that the skeleton was, in all likelihood, that of the infamous villain of Shakespeare's play. A new film, The Lost King, is based on the real-life story of amateur historian Philippa Langley, who was the driving force behind that excavation in the car park in 2012. It premiered this week. Let's have a look.
I'd quite like to visit his grave.
There isn't one. You sure you want to join this group? You look quite normal.
I'm not. Do you have any books on Richard III?
We have 8 titles.
I'll take them. Which ones? All of them. I know you're some sort of apparition. I've been trying to work out why you're here. I wonder if it's because you're lost. I know I can find him.
Who?
Richard.
Richard who?
Sorry, the third.
The king.
Yes.
This is starting to look like an unhealthy obsession.
I can't believe you just said that. I'm doing this for you.
Plenty have tried and failed. Well, I wish you the best of luck.
How can you possibly find him on your own?
The key.
However, not everyone believes that the body in the car park was Richard III. My next guest doubts it. Dominic Selwood is an historian and author. Dominic, what a spoil sport. Why do you doubt it?
Well, the science is actually quite surprising. The carbon dating of the body actually shows that the skeleton in the car park died either 25 or 35 years before the Battle of Bosworth. But the research team accounted for that by saying he probably had a fish-rich diet, so they changed the numbers. The paternal line DNA, which is the most important one for Richard, that's his Plantagenet DNA, he doesn't have it. He's not a Plantagenet. And the researchers said, well, that's probably because there was an illegitimacy somewhere in the line of succession. The eye colour and the hair colour in the DNA code are for blonde and blue. But actually, all the earliest pictures we have of Richard show him dark. And the researchers said, well, that's because the Tudors changed the paintings because they thought the Tudors thought, dark was bad. And then finally, the scoliosis you mentioned. There's no account in Richard's lifetime that he had any sort of spinal or back deformity. That came later with the Tudors, who also said that he gestated for 2 years in the womb. He was born with hair down to his shoulders and teeth. But what we see with the skeleton in the car park is not a hunchback. It is mild scoliosis, which actually, in all likelihood, would have been covered by clothes or armour. So actually, the science is a long way from proving it definitively. What we do have is the mitochondrial DNA you mentioned, showing that he came from the right maternal group. But all mothers give it to all their children. So in a very small period of time, you have a large number of people who have it. And when you're talking about the aristocracy of the late medieval period, someone buried in a friary somewhere, it's really not unlikely that there were many people who shared that group, even at the Battle of Bosworth.
You've made a lot of interesting points there. Let me just pick you up on the hunchback point. Did you say in passing there that there was no contemporary evidence that he had a hunchback or other deformity of the spine, that only comes with Tudor and Shakespearean propaganda later?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, there's no contemporary description of it at all. And it comes with the writers who, one in particular, had been saying very nice things about Richard during his lifetime, what a wonderful king he was, what a munificent leader. But then as soon as Henry VII comes in, he changes his tune and says that Henry VII is the saviour, Richard was evil. And then we start seeing these physical descriptions, because in the medieval mind, physical deformity or infirmity spelled some sort of inner moral corruption. And so that's when that all begins. And the hunchback dates from that period, not from his lifetime.
We didn't mention earlier that Richard is defeated at the Battle of Bosworth by Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor becomes Henry VII at that point, and he founds the Tudor dynasty, which of course includes Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. Now, is it difficult for you to speak up and say this? Because obviously we've all had a kind of national party celebrating the fact that we found Richard III in the car park. Such a wonderful story. Is it difficult to go against this current?
I mean, it is a great story. And when it all happened in 2012 and then the burial in 2014, the nation needed a bit of a fillip. And we know that royal events do give a boost and people enjoy them. So, yes, it's not a particularly popular view. And people don't always like hearing it. But I think it's important because it's about our relationship with the past. Do we just say that history it's fine for us to mould it to become what we want it to be? Or does it matter what history is? And when you see things like the way Vladimir Putin uses history. I mean, I'm not equating the University of Leicester and the Church of England with Putin, but, history matters. We think it doesn't, but then at times it pops up and comes very much to the forefront. And I think we do need to be honest vis-à-vis our history. And, I wouldn't say categorically it's not Richard, but I don't think you can say, as the researchers did, that they're 99.99% certain it is. The science simply doesn't back that up.
Is that what they said, 99.9? I used the phrase a moment ago, in all likelihood, which I think was a phrase I'd obviously found on the internet, but they went so far as say nearly 100% certain.
There was a large press conference and they said we are now 99.99% certain.
And I think that's not justified in your view?
I don't think the science backs that up. I simply can't.
Well, were you excited by the discovery? Were you excited by the fact that so many of us became interested in this bit of history that probably lots of people began to think about Richard III for the first time. In other words, whether it's true or not, it's played an interesting role in our development as people conscious of our history.
Absolutely, undoubtedly. And I think one of the fascinating things about that is we're seeing less and less history in the classroom now. It's being squeezed ever further out of curriculums. But people have a real hunger for it. I mean, the national excitement around that, or around the film The Dig when it came out around Sutton Hoo, or actually even around, you know, the Queen's recent funeral and the coronation we're going to see. When you read and listen to the debates that people are having about it, they really care about the historical angles in all these things and how it all fits together. So yes, as a historian, you know, I'm delighted to see these things actually on the screen and in the media in ways that people can really consume them and get close to them.
Dominic Selwood, thank you so much. Let's hope that we haven't ruined people's Sunday mornings with this bit of news. This week, the city of Liverpool celebrated its selection as the city to host the Eurovision Song Contest. It's stepping in for Ukraine, which is not in a position to welcome the competition, despite producing the winning song this year. To me, Liverpool looks like a natural choice for that honour, as around 60 years ago it became globally famous for the Mersey sound, beginning with the Beatles song Love, Love Me Do. On the 5th of October 1962, the track entered the UK chart and peaked at number 17. 2 years later, it was issued in the United States, where it became the fourth of 6 songs by the Beatles to hit number 1 in a 12-month period. Incidentally, today is what should have been John Lennon's 82nd birthday. Born in Liverpool on the 9th of October 1940, and the rest, as they say, is history. Well, here's a taste of the Beatles.
Love, love me do. You know I love you. I'll always be true. So please, love me do.
What a fantastic piece of footage. Not too many of us still remember those extraordinary days. I do, but I defer completely to my next guest, who was a Beatles fan way back when they played in the Cavern. And before Ringo joined the group, Pete Price is himself a Liverpool legend. He spent his youth at the Cavern Club, where the Beatles story started. Do you remember hearing Love, Love Me Do for the first time?
Oh, I do indeed. I do indeed. We were against it being a hit, you know. We didn't want to lose the Beatles. We wanted to keep them to ourselves. We knew something was going to happen. I mean, I used to go from school to the Cavern, and it's an amazing place. People, hundreds would queue to get into this ridiculous doorway, down some solid stone stairs, past Paddy the doorman, which, by the way, was totally illegal today with health and safety.
Sure.
Get inside, and you'd see them, and it would tap, tap, tap on the mic, and they were on. I first saw the Beatles at the YMCA in Hoylake on a Wednesday evening, which was 1 and 6 in old money to see them. We loved them.
How old were you when you first saw the Beatles?
16. I'd be about 15, but sort of 16, 15, that was the sort of age.
You were ahead of your time. Were you playing music yourself?
No. I was a fan. No, I wasn't even in the industry then. I was going to catering college and didn't even know I'd go into the business. But eventually got to know the Beatles, which was tremendous. And Cilla Black was on the cloakroom, taking your coats, which was great. But Jerry Marsden was bigger than the Beatles years ago, before the Beatles. But then when Love Me Do came out, it was the rawness of the song. It was just totally amazing. And then they went on to, they're showing some terrible photos of me. I was, would you say, a fashion icon? That, by the way, is on the front page of the Daily Sketch before it went bankrupt.
That
me
is a
in hot
brilliant
pants.
photo. Well, that one's better.
That's a bit better. Yeah, I've got some clothes on. But what was amazing, and then, because they were getting so big, when Pete Best left, we marched. We were outraged at Ringo Starr coming in. We wanted Pete Best to stay. So that's how long ago it was.
I might just say, we showed on the screen just then your membership card of the
Cavern, yeah.
Your 1963 membership card, which is obviously a very relevant date. But Love, Love Me Do, I think, was first performed way back in the 50s, is that right?
It was. When they did their music, they were trying to find themselves and which direction they were going in. And, of course, the Cavern in particular was this cellar that had the strangest vibe inside it. And it was the rawness. And we thought, how could they ever capture that onto record? It would be difficult. Years later, I went on to the Seychelles to work and had this amazing idea, wrote a letter to the Liverpool Echo saying, I think we should have a statue to the Beatles. Came back and it had exploded beyond belief. In the end, I decided to do it myself, and I raised the money and went to Arthur Dooley, who is sadly not with us anymore, and there is a statue in Matthew Street, opposite the Cavern, which I raised the money for.
Well done. And also, the airport in Liverpool is named John Lennon, is it not?
It is indeed.
And I believe it's certainly the only airport in Europe that is named after a musician.
Yeah.
Just tell us a bit about the atmosphere. You said you went into catering. What did you eat or drink in the Cavern?
Right, so you'd go down the stone stairs. It was because we used to wear jumpers with our CND badge and our college scarf, and you'd go down and you'd first of all have a bowl of soup. You'd have to have it very, very quickly before the sweat came down off the walls.
A bowl of soup?
A bowl of tomato soup. That's all you could afford after you paid £1.06 to get in. And then you'd have to use the toilet before it flooded over. It was a dreadful place, but it was a fantastic place. What people today don't see and what they've never seen is the rawness of the whole Merseybeat music. I've got all my Merseybeat magazines. I'd love to have brought them down with me, but they're bright yellow. They're all individually packed. We had the big three. We had Scylla, we had Jerry Marsden, we had the Escorts. We had so many bands, all emulating and singing around the Beatles.
Tell me what was happening within the music in those early days. I mean, they're singing to each other, aren't they? They're very united in those early days. That Please Please Me album.
Yeah, it was. Well, you see, Brian Epstein instilled in this, and we've got a new statue to Brian, which has just been put up a couple of weeks ago. Brian Epstein knew what he wanted from them. He saw the rawness of them, and I think it would be great if musicians these days could go back to that way, because they were singing to each other, but they were also conscious of the audience, and they always played to us, They were tremendous. I got very friendly with Jim, Paul's dad, and didn't meet Paul for a long time until the Red Rose tour. And then one day I was at Jim's house, went in for coffee, there was a little girl. Didn't know it was Stella. And I said, you're a nice little girl. Who do you belong to? And this guy went, actually me. And I went, hi, Paul. Oh, Paul. It was great. And all that, he still kept the house in Heswell. All the Japanese visitors go up to see the house, which is still there. But what was great, they never forgot the fans. But when you went to the Empire, when they became huge, you went to the Empire, you couldn't hear any music, because the screaming was unmerciful. It was terrible.
We saw that in that clip just now. Yeah. I was thinking we might see another clip in a moment. We might look at a clip of them singing Help. I particularly like to see this because I think the photography is absolutely fantastic. Can we see that little clip of Help? We haven't got it, unfortunately. I said before that they were singing to each other.
Yeah.
And I said that because there's a poignancy about it, because in the end, as we know, they fall out. Why? And is it inevitable in your experience?
Yes, it is inevitable.
And why?
Well, I've been in show business for 50 years, so I've worked with some of the great names, especially the ones from the past. It's a marriage. It's passion. With my radio show that I had for 40 years, I had two different producers because we were passionate about what we were doing. So the music from the Beatles they were passionate. They all were individual. They all had their own style. George was amazing. Ringo, not my favourite because I love Pete Best. Paul and John, that passion with music. So it's like a marriage. A marriage has to end. And there was a couple of ladies that were blamed for breaking the Beatles up, as in Yoko and Linda.
And maybe, Pete, a one-word answer on this one. How do you feel about Liverpool getting the Eurovision Song Contest?
I can't tell you how happy I am. It's going to be the greatest ever. We are so excited. More than one word, sorry.
Very good words indeed. Thanks to Pete Price. Coming up, Matilda, one of the best-loved recent musicals, has been adapted for the big screen. But Cats was also turned into a film and was a flop. So when do great musicals make great films? After the break.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, mate.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Portillo, filling your Sunday mornings with good conversation, topical discussion, and now the arts. A play within a play has always been a popular subject for writers. Described as one of the greatest British comedies ever written, Michael Frayn wrote Noises Off 4 decades ago. It's a farce about a touring band of actors putting on a play. And now there's a new production touring British theatres to mark its 40th anniversary. Stefan Kyriazis, arts editor of Express Online, is with me. This is, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This is extraordinary because the play within the play is a farce, and it's a sort of old British sex farce.
Mm-hmm.
So there are women who are scantily dressed, there are men whose trousers keep falling down, there are doors that keep banging. Can that possibly be fashionable for a revival?
It absolutely can, because we're British and we love this kind of thing, and it will work, it will always work, and when it's done well, which this is done very, very well, it's just an absolute joy. We will still laugh if someone slips over a banana on the street. You know, it's human nature. And this, to see everything going so terribly wrong all the time, is hugely, hugely, hugely entertaining. But also, we recognise this desperation when people are trying to do something. These people are trying to put on a play. They're not just mucking about. This is something that they desperately care about and they love, and everything keeps going wrong. So you're laughing at their misfortune, but you're groaning for them at the same time, and you feel their pain. And then they're all absolutely in the middle of affairs and rivalries and drunkenness. Yes. And so there's all of that. It's just enormous fun.
Yeah, a moment ago we were talking about the breakdown of the relationship of the Beatles.
Yep.
And Noises Off takes place over a period of time, and the relationships have deteriorated and difficulties have arisen. What about the device of the play within the play? I think I mentioned that Shakespeare used it. He used it in Hamlet. He used it in Midsummer Night's Dream. Is it perhaps a bit lazy, though? Because obviously theatre writers know about the theatre, and guess what? They write about the theatre.
But for us, as an audience, we get to peek behind the curtain. I mean, the tremendous thing is you get the same act done 3 times. So the first time is the worst dress rehearsal, and we don't get to see that. We see the finished product, and that's just horrendous. But then they rotate the entire set. You're looking at the back of the set. It's almost acted in entire silence as the actors go off onto the stage that you can't see. They're all behind the scenes, falling over, mugging, falling downstairs, missing their cues, and in the middle of jealous love rivalries, and it's just an absolute joy. So we get to peek behind the curtain, which is brilliant for us. Everyone wants to know what really goes on. So no, it's wonderful, wonderful.
I mean, Michael Frayn has been credited with writing the funniest play. Do you think that is getting close to the truth?
It's hilarious. Is it the funniest play? It's one of the... I've laughed. I belly laughed during this film. But I surprisingly... It's nicely done with Felicity Kendall. It's not so insanely mugging this time. I kind of cared as well. There was a little bit of melancholy to it, and I thought that was rather beautiful.
Well, talking of melancholy, gas prices are going up, the winter's going to be very difficult. Is the theatre offering us distractions and diversions?
It certainly is. And also, again, this is a touring show about a touring show. There are so many great touring shows on, and I want to enjoy myself more than anything. And there are shows out there on tour at the moment like Six, which is absolutely gloriously entertaining. I cannot recommend it highly enough, about the 6 wives of Henry VIII. Please go and see it. It's a huge buzz show in London and on Broadway. Young cast, and it's great for young audiences and older people. South Pacific, beautiful, classic musical, but with a very modern sensibility, gloriously staged and done at the moment. Again, please go and see it. Go and see Sister Act. It's nonsense. It's absolute froth. It's as silly as the film. You will have an absolute blast, and you'll be on your feet at the end. And yes, dear Lord, go in a nice warm theatre with hundreds of people and be happy and enjoy and just forget about your cares for a little while. So yes, there's a real need for it at the moment.
Most of that sounded like quite familiar material. Not much new there, or is there?
Six is a relatively new show. The new shows we've got coming up are Local Hero, which is based on the film about the oil executive going to a little Scottish village.
I remember it.
Music by Mark Knopfler, so that sounds absolutely wonderful. So that one is coming up and I'm quite excited. There's the Lavender Hill Mob, the old Alec Guinness film. I don't know if you remember that, but we remember.
I do.
It's a classic.
No, I certainly do.
So again, great fun, thoroughly enjoyment. That's coming up. Those haven't opened quite yet, but they're coming.
So maybe the industry is aware at the moment that we need to be entertained.
I hope so. I certainly hope so.
Let's pick up this theme of musicals. This week saw the film premiere of Matilda. It's based on the West End musical, which is based on a previous film, which is based on the original book by Roald Dahl. Let's have a look at that.
This school is full of rebels. What is your name?
Matilda. Matilda Wormwood.
There's no doubt that Matilda the musical was a roaring success, but how well does it translate to the screen, with Emma Thompson, by the way, as the headmistress? Other musicals haven't always done so well. Give us some examples of ones that have done well and ones that have done badly.
In terms of
translating to the screen.
Absolutely. Classically, fairly recently, Les Miserables was an absolute huge triumph. Mamma Mia, enormous, massive box office, steamrolling success. So those sorts of things that's the golden goose, where this is what we hope for. The ones that have bombed very, very recently, Cats, absolutely catastrophic. West Side Story didn't even make back its basic budget, let alone you have to make twice your budget.
OK, let's discuss West Side Story a moment. So we're talking about a Spielberg remake. The original had been 50 or 60 years before, 60 years before, I'm guessing. Yes, I must have seen it when I was about 9. I went to see the Spielberg, which I enjoyed, but I was left wondering why he had made it, because it didn't seem to me to add anything to the original.
I completely agree. To me, it felt like a very beautiful, glossy homage to something that was already done. It didn't. They were trying very much to bring in new things about urban cleansing, gendering, sexuality, cultural issues, but they didn't really land. And actually, those things are very strongly in the original. You don't always have to telegraph things for people. And it felt like he was too much in love with the source material. So he didn't want to tamper with it.
The great homage, which actually led him to tamper with it, was bringing back Rita Moreno, who's in the original as Anita, brings her back as an old lady.
Yes.
So it creates a whole new subplot. And by the way, transfers to her what I think should be the great song at the end of the musical, sort of into a position where it's three-quarters of the way through. So I thought he had damaged the original quite badly because of those interventions.
I completely agree. The ending just didn't work for me. I want somewhere ripping my heart out, and Maria and Tony. We don't want to spoil it for people, but you know, it should be devastating at the end. And the whole thing, I just thought, oh, isn't that gorgeous and beautiful? But it felt a little bit pleased with itself and a little bit overthought. And I was disappointed. Go back and watch the original. This original will stand forever.
So what about Matilda? Have you been able to see it?
I have.
And what's your verdict?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a different thing because in the theatre you're so involved, and this is the problem with musicals. You want to clap.
There you are. that is proof that you've seen it. That is the premiere.
Working the red carpet.
Look at you. Wow. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yes, you rated it quite highly.
I did. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one for me. I go and see it in the theatre. It's still a huge success. It's such an involving, participatory experience. You're there with the kids, and I struggle when I'm in the cinema because there's a big number, and then I want to. You can feel the audience isn't sure if they can clap or cheer in the cinema, and that's the difficulty with some musicals. It's beautifully done. Emma Thompson chews the scenery, and if you saw, she's got like this crazy prosthetic jaw. And Lashana Lynch, who has recently been in Bond, she's in The Woman King. She does these powerful, feisty roles. She's extraordinary. She plays Miss Honey, the sweet, bullied, timid schoolteacher, and sings beautifully. Whole other side to her. Very excited to see what she will do.
So why do some translate well from the theatre to the screen and others not? Is it just as simple as, some films are good and some are bad?
Partly, yes. Some films, Cats, are just dreadful, and everybody knows that. I think when you go into the theatre in any situation, but certainly a musical, you have to suspend disbelief. And this is a kind of compact between you and the audience. We all go in, we know cats don't sing, phantoms don't sing, and we agree to just go with it.
Yeah.
When it's up there on a big screen, that's a lot trickier.
Yeah.
It can still be done, but it's a lot harder to...
Yes, because you're missing the magic of being in the theatre, the proximity to the actors, which is all part of the experience, which helps you to... you want it all to work because you're there and you're longing for them to make it work. Yeah, it is a different thing. So that is a disadvantage. Favourite musicals of all time? I would nominate... West Side Story #1, I would certainly nominate. Cabaret, I thought, was a fantastic musical movie. What would you put on your
agree,
list?
and also the West End production at the moment is extraordinary and immersive. It's like nothing you've ever experienced. You are in Cabaret in pre-Nazi Germany, in the whole theatre. It's unbelievable. Les Mis, for me, I'm a sucker for Les Mis. I just think the score is absolutely extraordinary. I do, at the moment, in terms of film musicals that I would watch again and again, I do love the original West Side Story. From the very moment they're clicking their fingers on the street,
Absolutely.
I'm in.
The music is of such extraordinary quality. Just a word about Cabaret in the theatre in London, for those who haven't seen it. I was not particularly blown away by the performance, to tell you the truth, but I was blown away by the way that it is staged.
Yes.
And I don't want to spoil it for people, but when you go into the theatre, you'll encounter an atmosphere, a surrounding, which you do not expect in the least, which is absolutely brilliant. The way the theatre has converted to that space is superb. And so I'd absolutely recommend the experience, although, as I say, again, I was left... It's the other way around. I was left thinking that the theatre production was not a patch on the film that I had seen.
It's a little bit muted, I would agree.
Yeah.
It also depends. I've seen different performances now as Sally.
Yes.
I've seen the two.
Yes.
Personally, I preferred the second.
Yes.
It was slightly more sort of pain and passion to it.
Jolly difficult to be Liza Minnelli, isn't it?
Yes, but you can do your own thing and you can rip out.
Well, that's what they do. They do their own thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you're left thinking, ooh, maybe I prefer the way that Liza Minnelli did it.
And also Moulin Rouge, for example, which has gone the other way, film to theatre. That's incredibly immersive. When you go in, you are in this extraordinary Moulin Rouge in the theatre with giant elephants and windmills and red giant lights, and part of the stage comes into the audience. So that, it can go the other way too. Highly recommended.
Stefan Kyriazis, thank you very much indeed.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, if the Tories continue their infighting and undermining new Prime Minister Liz Truss, they'll be out of power for a generation. As the SNP start their annual conference, is an independent Scotland now inevitable? We'll speak to a top figure from the SNP and showbiz legends, the Crankies. Plus tomorrow's papers with full panel reaction, politics legend Anne Widdecombe, and our quiz of the week. A busy Sunday night show. See you at 9.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry towards the southeast, but wind and rain spreading in from the northwest. Let's home in on that detail. So starting off in the southwest then, and here, a mostly fine end to the day, but it will turn cloudier and windier ahead of some rain arriving overnight. Also a fine picture in the southeast, late sunshine, then clear skies after dusk, rain arriving there by the end of the evening. Wind and rain already reaching northern and western parts of Wales by 7 o'clock this evening, but drier towards the southeast, particularly around the Swansea area. It'll also be a largely dry start to the evening across the Midlands. That rain pushing in overnight, meaning everyone will have some wet and windy weather for a time. And a similar picture across the northeast of England, where the rain will be starting to push in, but won't affect most people until overnight. The winds strengthening and clouds building ahead of it. Meanwhile, taking a look at Scotland, the rain will have already cleared northern and western parts, with clear, colder air feeding in, a wet and windy end to the day in the south and east. And the heavy rain also largely clearing Northern Ireland, where it will then be mostly dry through the night, under clear skies, turning quite chilly as well. Looking at the national picture overnight, you can see how the rain will progress southeastwards, with a few showers following on, and that's how the weather's shaping up for this evening.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio.